triage is really one of the few things that you can ever be proactive in avoiding claims altogether. We don't deny care to improve the bottom line of the company, but we are going to mitigate, on average, 40% or more of the injuries from entering the clinical system altogether. So it really is focused on providing the appropriate level of care for that worker and making sure that if they do need clinical care, we facilitate that. But if they are not in need of that level of care, we can give them some self-care advice to take care of things pretty quickly.
Welcome to the Self-Insurance Podcast, brought to you by CRMBC. Every week, we're interviewing industry experts, restaurant operators, and brokers to talk about the world of workers' comp self-insurance in California. I'm so excited today to welcome Darrin Schenck to our podcast. He is the VP of Sales for TriageNow. Thank you so much for being here, Darrin.
Thanks, Cam. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about TriageNow. What do you guys do?
So we are a telephonic nurse triage solution for workplace injuries only. We don't delve into the general health stuff. We're solely focused on dealing with workplace injuries.
And tell us how you specifically got into this line of work, especially when you were originally a professional racquetball player. That's so awesome.
You've done your homework. Those two things are, kind of far apart in my own personal timeline. But I got involved in TriageNow day one of the organization. The founder and CEO came to me in a networking meeting when I was with a previous employer. And I was supposed to host the next meeting and announce to the group, hey, I'm leaving this particular job, which means I'm leaving this networking group. And he tackled me right after the meeting and said, hey, have you signed any paperwork? Is this final? Because I have an idea I want to bounce off you. I think you're my guy. And so we went to lunch the next day and he kind of laid out the plan. And I was not familiar with workers' compensation by any means prior to that. So I've learned on the fly and again, been here since day one, helping to build the company to where we are.
That's so awesome. And so we are a workers' comp self-insured group for the restaurant industry. And so you obviously work a lot with hospitality. The purpose of this podcast is to give our members and brokers the ability to dive deep into all of these different aspects of how we, manage claims and how we manage the group. And so nurse triage is obviously a huge important factor. Will you first go big picture and just explain what it is?
Yeah, so triage is really one of the few things that you can ever be proactive in avoiding claims altogether. And that, by having a registered nurse help determine what the appropriate level of care is for a workplace injury, we can avoid every little bump and scratch type injury going down the street to the clinic, or, as is very common in the restaurant business, things happen after normal clinic hours, which means every little bump and scratch ends up at the ER. So we're really a filter to that clinical system. We don't deny care to improve the bottom line of the company, but we are going to mitigate, on average, 40% or more of the injuries from entering the clinical system altogether. So it really is focused on providing the appropriate level of care for that worker and making sure that if they do need clinical care, we facilitate that. But if they are not in need of that level of care, we can give them some self-care advice to take care of things pretty quickly.
40%, you said.
So actually, that's an average for our entire client base. In the hospitality vertical in particular, most of our clients are hovering in the 50% range, which means literally 1 out of every 2 workplace injuries that occurs doesn't enter the clinical system. So that's a pretty significant impact, as you can imagine.
It's huge. That's absolutely huge. So you've given us a little teaser on it, but let's dive a little bit deeper on what are all the benefits of having a telephonic nurse triage program.
Yeah, so whether you're doing fine dining or quick serve restaurants, the injuries are kind of the same, right? You have slips and falls, minor burns and abrasions and stuff and lacerations, things like that. What we're looking to do is to weed out the minor injuries that won't need clinical care, such as a pulled back muscle, right? And I use this example all the time. If you were doing something at the house over the weekend and pull the back muscle. You can stand up straight, you can take a deep breath without pain, etc. You're not taking your credit card down the street to have somebody at a clinic look at you. But the problem in the workplace scenario is for the employee that there is an expectation of care to be provided by the employer. The employers don't want any liability, and they don't employ nurses on site or doctors or anything like that. So you don't want a manager or a supervisor making a medical decision for that injured employee. So back to your original question, not only do we mitigate the number of injuries that become claims, we can handle all the documentation that's part of the process. That will reduce OSHA recordables and XMOD or EMR dings as well. All of those are a positive benefit to the service.
And what do you, I think from my own personal perspective, sometimes we see claims get litigated just because the employee is frightened and no one's communicating with them. And so they don't know what to do. So then they call an attorney, or an attorney has already called them. So I think there's a lot of, one of the other side benefits is just the fact that your people, the nurses, are talking to them right away and telling them, taking the fear out of that. Is that part of your analysis in this 50% number?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big portion of what we do. This is a human-to-human interaction with a neutral third-party registered nurse. And I specify that for the following reasons. One, we're going to ask all of the HIPAA-protected medical questions that are associated with this injury, such as, are you diabetic? Are you on blood thinners or other medications, things like that? As you know, you never want a supervisor asking those types of questions. But if you don't factor that into the care, now you're leaving some vital details out and providing the appropriate level of care for that person. He's going to add one more thought to that.
Yeah.
Additionally, when someone calls in, we inform the caller that all calls are recorded. And on occasion, we will have somebody tell us, oh, I was water skiing over the weekend and hurt my knee, but now that I've been at work all day, my knee hurts, so I'm calling to report a workplace injury. Sorry, that's not a workplace injury. And that's where what we provide in terms of documentation and a call recording gives the employer some real ground to stand on in determining non-compensability.
Yeah, that's gold for litigation for sure. Absolutely. So our group in particular, we range in size from restaurant owners that have, 40, 50, 60 locations, franchisees, to smaller in number operations, but fine dining, large like 5 stores, but it might be $100 million operation. Right. What size, is there a rule of thumb of what size is the right size to start using nurse triage?
That's a great question. I'm going to say yes and no. There's a twofold answer to this. If somebody has 100 injuries annually, we would expect to see them in the neighborhood of a 10-to-1 savings to cost ratio just on their clinical expenditure. So for the larger entities, that's an easy thing to lead with. But for somebody that's a smaller entity that might have 1 or 2 restaurants, we're a great safety net. We're not going to move the needle a ton on the financial side because they're not going to have a ton of injuries over the course of a year anyway. But again, when you can outsource the liability of making medical recommendations and offload the documentation services and filing the claims and things like that, that can be just as beneficial, if not more, to somebody who is wearing a lot of hats because it's a smaller operation. If we can take over that workload for them, that tends to have a lot of benefit.
Have you, in your implementation of this program over the years, what challenges have you had with user acceptance? In other words, the restaurant operators actually using the service, because that's one of our biggest challenges, is making sure that all the managers know the protocol and follow the steps and file the report. How have you guys dealt with that? And have you faced that challenge?
No doubt. We can only help the people who call us, right? So right. That is the key component to the success of the program. However, I think the way that we present this, and I don't know that this is unique to us, but we present this as, let me rephrase that. I don't know that this is unique to TriageNow, but we present this as an employee benefit. You have access to a medical professional literally within seconds of that injury occurring, And that person will be the one who helps determine what is the next step in the care process for you. So when it's presented as an employee benefit and not a cost mitigation tool or a claim reduction tool, that gets the buy-in from the employees, because it truly is something that the company is implementing for their own benefit.
That's a really, really great point. So on that note, we've touched already on the cost mitigation part of it, because I represent a carrier, and you've touched a little bit, and maybe we've already answered this on the benefits to the employees. But there's a lot of benefits to the employees. What other things would you highlight as benefits?
One of the things that TriageNow does is we send a text message out to the injured employee's cell phone immediately after the call with the nurse, and that is a recap of what to do next. It's either a checklist of what to do for self-care at home, or it's a summary of the clinic information, including that clinic's hours of operation, so the employee can plan their visit to that clinic accordingly. Not every disposition is going to be drop what you're doing and go right now. So if we recommend somebody is seen within the next 24 hours, share the clinic name, address, phone number, and hours of operation so they can plan that visit accordingly. So it streamlines the whole process for in this unfortunate scenario of a workplace injury. We're trying to make things as easy as possible for the employee.
We touched a little bit about fraudulent workers' comp claims, and you explained that the one example of someone saying, yeah, I went water skiing over the weekend. What other ways have you seen Nurse Triage program, your program, impact fraud?
That's really the biggest piece, because we're not in the work comp space. We are triage services that are the very tip of the spear when it comes to the whole spectrum of a workplace injury happening. So we inform the callers during the auto attendant when that call is first answered that this call is being recorded. So legally, we've met our obligation there. But it is amazing to me, 12 years into the business, how open and honest people are when they are on the phone with a nurse and the supervisor is not hovering over them or doing a three-way phone call. When they know they have the privacy to speak to the nurse, all kinds of details come out. Whether it was, oh, I left my company-issued back brace in the car, I forgot my slip-resistant shoes today, I'm wearing my regular tennis shoes, and that's why I fell in the kitchen. That may not affect the overall outcome of that claim, but as an employer, those are definitely details that you want to be aware of and maybe take some follow-up action accordingly.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. So you guys do some things that are different in your company. What are the differentiators in the way that you guys approach this?
So there's a couple of things. As you're aware, there's no governing body for triage services, so we don't all report to a main entity and have rankings or anything like that, right? But anecdotally, I've made a living pulling clients away from competitors and gathering data from them. So I think it's fairly safe to say that these are true industry differentiators. I guess the first thing I'll start with is we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. In today's world, gathering HIPAA-protected information as well as sensitive demographic data, that was something that we prioritized a few years ago, and we've held that designation for about 6 years now. We have a third-party company that, audits us once a year, and we always have to do upgrades and new processes to maintain that designation.
Yeah, that's huge right now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only getting worse. And I don't expect us to be one of the few or maybe the only company that has that designation forever. That's becoming a request on RFPs in the industry. So I think others will probably catch up before long. Yeah. Secondarily, and it's probably 1B, depending on what the priority of the company is, we use a military triage approach to dealing with workplace injuries. So our medical director, when he sat down roughly 13 years ago to be the architect of our system, looked at it through his lens of field-based experience. Can we help you where you are and get you back in action? Or do we need to get you to a clinical environment? And because he was actually a military triage physician in the Air Force Reserves up until a few years ago, that one little twist on the front end of the process is why we see that over 40% average self-care rate for our client base.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. So Darrin, do you have a closing thought for us of some, a big success story or something that has really surprised you over the years getting involved in this?
I'm going to go a little different direction, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how many companies don't employ a triage solution. There's still an awful lot out there that this is a new and undiscovered thing. And there's so much benefit to be had, whether you're a Fortune 100 company with thousands of injuries a year because you have hundreds of thousands of employees, or you own one restaurant in your hometown and you have a dozen employees. Everybody can find benefit as an employer, and then of course as an employee utilizing this service. So it's really cool to be part of the process of not only helping companies care for their workers better, but also truly have an impact on their bottom line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Darrin, thank you so much for your time today. Do you still play racquetball?
Not very much at all anymore. I played competitively for a lot of years. Then I switched over to coaching at Arizona State University for 15 years. And, having it be your job that long and going back to trying to do it for fun isn't so easy. So once in a great while, but I spend a lot more time fly fishing than I do playing racquetball.
Smart. Probably better for your knees, right?
Definitely.
Thank you so much for your time today. And I really appreciate you talking to us and talking to our members about the importance of this and getting the word out so that they're more aware of why this is so critical. And it really does help the injured worker, but there is an economic reason to do it.
Okay, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for the Self-Insurance Podcast brought to you by CRMBC. If there's a topic you'd like to learn more about, or if you have any questions, just email us at info@crmbc.com. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share, and join us again next week for more tips on self-insurance.